Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Lisaan-ul-Qur'an Easier Than English, Lesson 18. Alhamdulillah, in the previous lesson, we started looking at the imperfect tense verb. That is called al-mudare in Arabic, an action that is not yet done, i.e. an action being done now or will be done in the future. So what we're going to do in this lesson is look at the 14 forms and identify the different components within the forms themselves and what are the things added as a suffix and a prefix to the three root letters to give us the 14 different forms of the verb. We've already familiar with the 6 different patterns of verbs which we already looked at. For example, fataha, yaftahu, nasara, yansuru, daraba, yadribu, sami'a, yasma'u, and the other 2 remaining rare forms we also looked at, inshallah ta'ala. What we're going to do in this lesson, which is very, very important, look at the common prefixes. What are the common things that come in front of the mudare and the impact they have on the meaning itself? For example, how to negate the verb. Not only that, we'll look at how to put the verb in the future tense and what are the other things or other components that come in to impact on the mudare. The mudare is a lot more detailed than the madi. So what we're going to do in this lesson, inshallah ta'ala, is introduce the most common things, and later on, where required, we will have dedicated lessons at the intermediate level also, as this is a very, very important form for us to recognize. So we have a lot to go through in this lesson. Let's begin with Allah's blessed name. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.
اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق.
The verb, al-fa'lu. Let's quickly review what we have done so far with the verb. Few points, inshallah ta'ala. First of all, we note that every verb in Arabic has some detailed information. 3 most important and most easily to acquire are the fact that every verb is based upon root letters, derived from root letters, 99.99% of them based upon 3 root letters. So this verb here is based upon the root letters Noon, Sad, and Ra. So again, it has a basic meaning of help. And then we noted that every verb will have a doer embedded in it. So for example, this verb has I, the pronoun for I, embedded within the verb itself. So nasartu, this tu part is telling me that this is I who had done the act of the verb. So every verb will have a pronoun embedded within it. And then of course, from the shape itself, we can tell whether the verb is madi, mudare, or we're going to soon learn whether it is amr, just by looking at the pattern itself. This pattern, of course, by now, you should be familiar. It is the madi, so tense. So 3 pieces of information: the root, which gives us the basic meaning, and most importantly, the pronoun, which tells us who's doing the action or has done the action, and the tense, whether it has been complete, as he done already, or whether it is being done or will be done in the future. So these are a few points that we can identify on every verb, and it is absolutely critical to be able to tell this 3 pieces of information in order to be able to translate it correctly. We also reminded ourselves there are 3 tenses in Arabic. Firstly, we have the madi. The madi is an action that is complete. That's why it's also called the perfect tense in Arabic grammar books. So perfect as in the action has been fully completed, whether it was done 1 nanosecond ago or 1 trillion years ago, makes no difference. The action itself is complete. Then we have the mudare. Mudare actually can give us 3 basic meaning. One being habitual. For example, present and habitual, he helps, or present and continuous, he is helping, or the future tense, he will help. So we have 3 basic essential meaning, and it is the pattern of the mudare, and of course the context will tell us which of these 3 we should translate it as. And we also have the amr, which is the command form of the verb. Again, we're going to learn that inshallah ta'ala in the coming lessons. So these are the 3 different tenses, prime tenses in Arabic, that we can identify simply by looking at the verb. I'm sure you can also recall that every verb in Arabic belongs to a pattern, a form. And we have the past and the present and so on. It conforms to a strict pattern. Alhamdulillah, so far, we've covered the whole 6 of the mujarrad, the 6 patterns that are possible in the mujarrad form. Again, I remind you, mujarrad is 3 root letters only, no addition in the root itself, i.e. when we do the madi, sigla number 1, it is only the 3 root letters that's there. And then we have form 2 to form 10. Of course, there are some other forms which are rare, but as far as Quranic Arabic is concerned, if we learn these will give us more than 99% of the verbs that we're going to likely to come across. So again, the total number of verbs is on the screen. So we have the mujarrad, which we are currently studying, and then we have the mazid, which we will cover inshallah in the intermediate level. So you can see the number of verbs and the patterns And the truth is that if you learn one of them only, all the other patterns will conform to the same set of rules, the same set of prefixes, suffixes, etc., except for the root letters will behave or will conform to a strict pattern form, which is different than the ones we've covered so far. And that's all the difference there really is. All the rules and everything else is exactly the same. So again, just to give you an overview of where we are so far in the course. Summary of the Form 1 Mujarrad, the 6 babs. So let's quickly go through the 6 patterns. Again, if you know the fa'ala, you should be able to form the rest of the 14. Yaf'alu, you should again be able to form the rest of the 14, long as you practice these 6 verbs. In particular, as I mentioned before, right at the beginning, most important ones are the first 4. And if you learn the first 4, then inshallah ta'ala, you don't really need to go any further. So we have the fataha, nasara, daraba, sami'a, and this hasiba is very, very rare, and karuma is also very rarely used. So these first 4 is the ones that you need to practice. So let's quickly go through what we mentioned about memorizing them. So do we go through them in detail, inshallah? Open the Quran. Fataha yaftahu. Allah will help you. Nasara yansuru. Otherwise the dunya will beat you. Daraba yadribu. Therefore listen carefully. Sami'a yasma'u. Count your good deeds. Hasiba yahsibu. And be noble. Karuma yakrumu. So these 6 sentences, inshallah, will help you remember these 6 patterns. Again, I emphasize the last 2 are very rare, and you will come out only few verbs in the Quranic study. And of course, there are derived nouns which do come from them. That's why I've included them. But these are the 6 patterns. I also shared with you the screen here where we've conjugated all 6 of them for you. And the coloring, inshallah ta'ala, will help you, I hope, identify that they're almost everything is the same, apart from the 3 root letters in the middle, how they are being, how the root has different vowels added to it to give us the 2 different patterns. So this is the 6 patterns. Again, emphasize on the first 4. That will give you overwhelming majority of the mujarrad verbs you're likely to come across. Al-Mudari, the imperfect verb in detail. As a quick recap, we went through the Madi in some detail. If you recall, the 14 different forms, I put different coloring at the end, again to indicate the pronoun that is embedded inside every single verb in the Madi, which you know in detail now, inshallah ta'ala. And I went through each of the part in detail. And as I mentioned to you, as far as number 1 and number 4 is concerned, which is this one and this one, fataha and fatahat, we said the doer was hidden and it is he or she. And the ta is a sign of feminine. Again, please note these 2 points, and the red bits, of course, indicate the pronoun in detail. And we also shared this screen with you where we went through each of the parts in detail. Please refer back to the lessons on the Madi for you to go through this in detail. I'm not going to go through here to save time. So again, as a quick reminder, point number 1, huwa and hiya version, which is, for example, fataha and fatahat, there's a possibility of an external doer. Otherwise, you will translate he, it, she, or it, depending on the context. And then with number 2 and number 5, we had the alif, which is indicating huma, in this case, for example, they or antuma. So you got 2 and 5 indicating the dual form. And then we had the alif, which is attached at the end of fatahu, this version, which is number 3, and that is really there for protection. And then we went to 4 and 5. We have the ta, which is the ta of feminine, not the doer itself. And then again, some additional notes there for you, which will help you, inshallah ta'ala, recall the Madi, which is fataha in this example. Take a look at the 14 forms of the Mudari, which we went through in detail in the previous lesson, conjugation of it, I mean. Here, we're not going to go through conjugation, but I want to point out some very important points, which we did not really go through in detail in the previous lesson. The first point you will note that I have here, huwa yaftahu, he opens, which is, again, you know already. Then I have hiya taftahu, and I have anta taftahu. So we have number 4 and number 7 is exactly the same. So number 4, of course, is she, and number 7 is you, masculine. So we note that in Arabic grammar, for Mudari, it is hiya taftahu, and also anta taftahu. It is the same. And this is a rule in Arabic, it's just the way it is. Every single mudari verb, please note that number 4 and number 7 will be exactly the same in terms of form. How will you tell the difference? Well, you will tell the difference from the context. In the context, you should be able to tell the difference. It is quite important because remember, when it's number 1 and number 4, we look for an external doer. There possibly one, if not, we will translate it as it is. So number 1 and number 4 is the external doer. Number 4 and number 7 is the same. So sometimes it's difficult to tell what's going on. But again, a little bit of focus in the text and soon we'll get very used to it. The other thing you will also note that I have here, number 5, number 8, and number 11 is also exactly the same. All right, exactly the same. And to be honest, even number 2 is almost exactly the same, except for the fact that we are using ya in this case, and then we are using ta here and ta this way, and we're using ta that way. That's the way it is in the Arabic language. Again, how do you tell the difference? Simply with the context. So these are the few similar verbs or same back patterns repeated in the 14 forms, which you may or may not have noticed. Please make a note of them. Inshallah ta'ala, is quite obvious from the way the chart is drawn, but I wanted to highlight these points for you. Another very important point about the patterns that you will note that we have a set, 5 of them, that do not have any suffixes. So there's nothing at the end of them. No wow, no noon, nothing added at the end of them. Please take a close look at them. So we have yaftahu, taftahu, taftahu, aftahu, naftahu. All of them have no suffixes at the end, i.e. no wow, no noon as we see, or the alif as we see in the others. So they are without any suffix. They all end in this pattern with a dhamma. Please note that. Yaftahu, taftahu, taftahu, aftahu, naftahu. They all end with a dhamma, a pesh. Then we have another set which all end with a green noon. Okay, I've colored it in green just to highlight the difference for you. This noon is called the noon of i'rab. Please just make a note of that. This noon is called the noon of i'rab, and we have 4, 5, 6, 7 of them that have this noon at the end. And then we have 2 with a purple noon for the sake of coloring here, and they are also another group. So we got 3 groups here. One that end with a dhamma, another group that end with a green noon, another group or 2 of them that end with a purple noon. Please just note those 3 different groups. We're going to group them into 3 to make our studies a little bit more easier, inshallah ta'ala. So again, I've listed them vertically down just so that we can illustrate what's going on. So please note with the first form that ends with a dhamma, what happens with them? In all of them, we are saying that the doer is not expressed by a pronoun. It is mustatir, it is hidden. So the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them that we've got highlighted, which end with oo sound, which you can see on the screen, they are ending with a dhamma. Here, the doer is hidden. Please note that, inshallah ta'ala. Again, the same point being repeated with the madi and the mudari. It is only on the huwa and the hiya version, which is number 1 and 4, we look for an external doer. But the remaining 1, 4, 7, 13, and 14 that end with a dhamma, they are, the doer itself is hidden. There is no pronoun in the form of a letter to represent a pronoun. We will say that the pronoun is hidden in the meaning. So when you translate, you need to translate correctly. So if you learnt them in the order that I taught you and in the pronoun table that I taught you, inshallah ta'ala, I'm hoping that this will not cause you a confusion. But one thing important to note about this dhamma, on certain occasion, this dhamma will be changed to a fatha. From pesh, it will become a zabar. Okay, please note that. And on certain occasion, it will go from pesh to a sukoon. Okay, from pesh, dhamma to a sukoon. And we'll explain that inshallah ta'ala briefly in this session. So these 1, 4, 7, 13, and 14, these ones which do not have a suffix ending with a u, sometimes you will see them a, sometimes you will see them with a sukoon. Why that happens, I'll show you briefly, and we will have dedicated lessons later on. So please note, this is your first group. The second group end with the green noon. The green noon at the end. This noon is called the noon of i'rab, and it happens in 7 patterns I beg your pardon, 7 patterns where this noon of i'rab happens. Again, under specific condition, this noon disappears. This noon is removed because of the impact of certain prepositions, and we will look at them inshallah ta'ala shortly. So again, this noon disappears. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. And again, this is one group. Your third group here is 6 and 12 with the purple noon. That never goes. That always remains. That noon does not disappear. And we're going to call this one the noon of pronoun. There are many names for it, but we'll stick with this one inshallah ta'ala. The noon of pronoun. So the purple noon does not disappear. The green noon sometimes goes, depend on what has been impacted upon. And the dhamma at the end sometimes changed to a fatha, sometimes is changed to a sukun. So this is the detailed look at the mudare. This will save you, inshallah, I'm hoping, hours and hours of study, because this subject, unfortunately, can be very convoluted, very complex. But I'm hoping, inshallah, that I'm quickly introducing it, giving you an overview. Later on in intermediate level, we can look at it in detail. So please note the detail of the mudare. There is some more complexity as compared to the madi. But this is all you will need to know as far as, inshallah ta'ala, even getting you to intermediate level of study. And lastly, of course, the beginning of the verb I mentioned many, many times, ya, ta, a, na, indicates the sign of mudare. And from there, of course, I can tell if it's a, it is I, na, it's we. Okay, so again, these are the signs that you see in front of the verb to indicate that this is a mudare. Please note them down. And again, as I mentioned with the example with the plane, if you're in the runway, your job is to guide the plane. When the plane flies away, you see the rear end of the plane. When the plane is coming towards the landing on the runway, you see it, see the front of the verb. And that's a quick way of reminding what is happening with the past tense and what is happening with the mudare. So these are the few details of the verb, inshallah ta'ala. Please take a look as a comparison here. We have the madi and we have the mudare. We've only used one verb, fataha, but of course it will be exactly the same with every other verb. You'll have 14 forms in the madi, 14 in the mudare, all derived from the 3 root letters. And in this case, it is fa, ta, and ha. And we've used that as our template to explain the 14 pronouns which are hidden within every one of these verbs. The case of al-mudare. The mudare verb is a little bit more complex than the madi. It has something unique. Every other verb in Arabic, whether it is the madi or the command form, the amr, there is no change to it. It does not change under any circumstances. It remains fixed. Now, we noted the nouns, they change their ending. A similar thing can happen with the mudare, slightly differently, but the terms are same, so it causes some confusion. And that is why I've grouped them in 3 to remove this confusion right from the beginning. We will be discussing this in detail, inshallah ta'ala, in forthcoming lessons at intermediate level. But now I need to introduce it to show you what happens and why the coloring is there. So at least you're aware of the subject. And when we go to detailed study, we will look at in detail. So the default position of the mudare, we will call it the rafa version, similar to what we did with the ism. This will be the default version. Now, what happens in the default version, as you will note, the first group that we separated in the previous lesson will end with the u in the 5 that we have with the dhamma. The second group, which has the green noon, will end with that green noon. And the third, of course, has the purple noon. So they'll be the same. This is the normal position of the mudare. Under certain circumstances, certain changes will occur in the mudare, and let's go through them first. So when we put certain particles, short words, in front of the mudare, for example, we have an, lan, kai, idan. Just remember lan for now, inshallah, and that will do. So lan coming in front of the mudare, what it does, changes those that have the dhamma, the first set, into a fatha. From yaftahu, it becomes yaftaha. From taftahu, it becomes taftaha. From taftahu, again, it becomes taftaha. From aftahu, it becomes aftaha. And from naftahu, it becomes naftaha. So the u, the pesh, is changed to a zabar. Dhamma changed to a fatha. So when lan comes in front of the first set, this is the change. For the second set, which has the green noon, when lan comes in front, the noon is removed. So the noon goes, and therefore you're left with, for example, yaftaha in the first one, yaftahu in the second one, and taftaha, etc., etc. So when lan comes, the noon of i'rab is removed. And this is called the nasab status for the second column where the noon is removed, for the first column where we have the fatha. The third, even though lan comes in front, there is no change at all. The purple noon remains intact. It is mabni, it does not change. Why? Because this noon is not the noon of i'rab, but rather it is the noon of the pronoun. So with an, lan, kai, idan, we will change it to the nasab status. The mudari will change. The reason I'm introducing it at this level is very soon, inshallah, when you open the Quran, you might not be able to recognize the verb because you're expecting a u at the end. And the reason why it has changed is this. Now, each one of these words, of course, has certain meaning, very similar to what we saw with inna and her sisters, as well as the huruf of jar. It will have a meaning, but grammatically, they all behave the same. We will again have dedicated lesson on each one of those in more detail, inshallah ta'ala. We have another set, which I've only included two of them here, lam and lamma, for example. When they come in front of the mudari, for the first set, what do? They convert it to a sukoon. So it'll become lam yaftah. Lam yaftah. Not hu, not ha, yaftah with a sukoon. And then we have taftah, taftah, aftah, naftah. So with lam, this is the change. Lam and few others, inshallah ta'ala, we will go in more detail later. As far as the noon of i'rab, exactly the same thing happens as we saw before with lan. The noon of i'rab disappears when lam impacts on the verb itself. So when you see the noon has gone, two possibilities. One is the nasab set or this set, inshallah, which I'll give you the name in a second. And again, the third group, yaftahna, does not change at all. It will remain intact because it is mabni, and the noon at the end is the noon of pronoun, not the noon of i'rab. This state is called jusif in English, jazm in Arabic, okay? Majzoom is another word that's used for it. Why? Because in the first group, it takes a sukoon. So please note that this is the third set and how the change it happens. The first default, rafa, u, and then the nasab ones, a, and the jazm ones with a sukoon. Please note, it's not jar. Jar takes a kasra. This is not jar, this is jazm. And so please note that name. It will help you, inshallah ta'ala, avoid confusion. And that is why we colored them this way right from the beginning. So you have this idea of the three groups and how to identify them. So inshallah, this sheet again will give you the summary of what I just went through to you in some detail and what happens to the three different groups and why I have grouped them in three different sets here for easy learning, inshallah ta'ala. Again, it is not as complex as it looks. Once we've done a few practice, inshallah ta'ala, you'll be able to easily recognize them. And of course, you'll know the reason why the noon has dropped or the reason why the fatha, the dhamma has been changed to a fatha or a sukoon. So just make a note of this, inshallah, as I asked you in the previous session. This will summarize the changes and the impact that those particles have on the verb mudari, which is again the same with every pattern of verbs that you will have. When these particles come in front, they will make those changes. Easy way to conjugate the most commonly used forms of al-mudari. The mudari verb can look very complex and sometimes how am I going to remember all this information? In honesty, the ones that you really need to focus on are the singulars mainly and some of the plurals, because these are the ones that are most commonly used in the Quran. Also, they are the ones most commonly used in normal language or normal text. So these are the ones you need to focus on. Let's take an example with the verb ain, ba, and dal, which belongs to the nasara pattern. So if you were to write the past tense, the madi of that, you will write, of course, abada, abada, and you can do all the 14 forms easily. Now, you know that this conforms to the nasara pattern. So the mudari should be, you should work that out, nasara yansuru. So you replace the nun sadra with ain, ba, dal, and you get with ya'budu. End up with ya'budu. Now, if you know ya'budu, then you should be easily able to tell me that the feminine version of here should be ta'budu. Yes? And anta is exactly the same. We repeated this many times for you. So you have ta'budu. And then for ana, I have a'budu. And then for nahnu, we have na'budu. Very easy. Now we want to go to plural of ya'budu. We will just add a suffix to the end So we have ya'budu, and then we just simply put waw and noon at the end. Ya'buduna, ya'buduna. And for anta, the plural will be exactly the same as ta'budu, except for the suffix that will come at the end, and we will just copy and paste to save time. Ta'buduna, ta'buduna. And these are the most commonly used forms in the language, as well as, of course, in the Quran. The singular and some of the plurals that you see. The rest of them you can easily do now. Inshallah ta'ala, you can go with the base from ya'budu and add the ani and so on endings if you want to practice those also. But these are the most common ones that you will see in the Quran. So if you can recognize these, inshallah ta'ala, you should be able to fly through the subject of the mudari. Please note, these prefixes that I've added to ya, ta, na, these are exactly the same for every mudari verb. Same rule, no matter what pattern, what they are. So soon, inshallah ta'ala, you will be able to recognize these patterns, whether it is an ism or a verb, and inshallah ta'ala, you should be able to derive who the doer is, again, relatively easily from these patterns. So these are the ones I want you to focus on. Please take some verbs from the previous lesson and just write them out a few times, inshallah, and you'll soon be able to get the pattern inside you. And then when you open the Quran, you see, okay, this word looks similar to ya'budu, or it looks similar to yaftahu, or yadribu, etc., or yasma'u, for example. And you can do the 14 forms from there. So these are the ones you need to focus on. Relatively easy. And inshallah ta'ala, as you can see, just by knowing the prefixes and the suffixes, we can fly through this subject. So please take advantage of this little tip and really practice those. These are the ones I looked out for most when I was studying, and these are the ones I memorized repeatedly, and I could able to record them instantly. Please use your hand when practicing, inshallah, and this will remind you which of the 14 forms it is. Again, use this template, as many copies as you can, to write them out. Negate al-mudari, the imperfect verb. Now, if you recall, when we did the madi, we said that we can negate the madi by using ma or occasionally la to negate the meaning of the past tense. So, for example, fataha, he opened. Ma fataha, he did not open. We went through this in some detail. La can also be used, but predominantly it is ma that is placed in front of the madi to negate its meaning. So with the madi, we have ma or la. Ma predominantly used, la rarely used. And then with the mudari, is the other way around. La is most commonly used to negate the mudari verb. So la yaftahu, ma can be used on rare occasions, but mainly it is la. So for example, la yaf'alu, he isn't doing, he will not do, he does not do. That kind of translation. And ma yaf'alu will give us, he isn't doing, he doesn't do. It does not give us the future tense meaning. That's the only slight difference between the two. So la is predominantly used with the mudari to convert the meaning to a negation of the verb. So let's look at a few examples. We have la yaftahu. La yaftahu will give us the meaning of he does not open. He does not open. It's a statement not telling somebody not to open, but saying that he does not open. Okay, and then we have la aftahu, I do not open. I do not open. So it's a negation of the verb. I do not open. La taftahuna will give us the meaning you all do not open. La taftahuna will give us the meaning of you all do not open. So again, you can see very easily, if you can identify the mudari verb, you can translate now with la, just negate the meaning of the verb. Again, I've conjugated the whole 14 for you here on the screen, and this applies to every mudari, irrespective of what group it belongs to. So again, you can see here, la yaftahu, la yaftahani, la yaftahuna, etc., etc., etc. So la will negate the mudari predominantly. Using qad with al-mudari. Alhamdulillah, we've seen qad being used with al-madi before. So for example, qad dhahaba hamidun. Hamid certainly went. So it gives us the meaning of certainty. It can also give us the meaning of something just happened just now. So for example, qad dhahaba zaydun. I can translate that Zayd has gone, meaning he just left. So these are the two ways qad can be used with the madi. And we've seen qad being used with all 14 forms, inshallah. And again, it gives us the meaning of emphasis or near past, as in just immediately happening. So this is the qad with the madi, which we've seen already. Qad is also used, not so frequently, but it's also used with the mudari. It has two things. Again, one is the meaning of emphasis, but more importantly, it also gives us the meaning of something happening more frequently. More frequently, that something regularly happens. So again, here you can see one example from the Quran. Surah Hijr, I have got ayah number 97 here. Wala qad, and certainly na'lamu, we already know. So there's an emphasis in the meaning given here in this context. Inshallah, you can check the ayah in your own time for more detailed analysis. So again, qad can come in front of the mudari also, and it is exactly the same. There is no changes to anything. Qad is a particle. It does not change. So very, very important emphasis, as well as giving us the meaning of something habitual happening frequently. Using sa and sawfa with al-mudari. We already mentioned that yaftahu means he opens, he is opening, or he will open, all three. But there is a way in Arabic to certainly put it into the future tense. For example, if I put sawfa in front, sawfa yaftahu. Huwa yaftahu, now I'm saying sawfa yaftahu. Or I can say sa yaftahu. Sa yaftahu. So what would be the change in meaning? Yaftahu means he opens. Sawfa yaftahu, soon he will open. Soon, as in near future. Sa yaftahu, very soon, immediate future. Very soon he will open. So that's the difference between sawfa and sa. And they're quite extensively used in the Quran. So we have sawfa yaftahu, and then we have sa yaftahu. Of course, sa being a single letter word, it will be joined onto the verb. Sawfa not being a single letter word, it will be written separately. So again, let's look at one more example. Aftahu, I open. Sawfa aftahu, soon I will open. And sa aftahu, very soon I will open. So soon I will open, very soon I will open. So take a quick look at these two, inshallah. Sawfa plus the mudari, soon, used 42 times in the Quran. Sa plus the mudari, very soon, used 119 times in the Quran. So again, very, very commonly used prefix before the verb in order to give us the meaning of the future tense. Please make a note of those, inshallah. And I've also got the full chart here for you, fully conjugated. And you can see with sa and with sawfa, the meaning being very soon or soon. And there is no other change to the verb to note. Very, very easy to use. Just the sa will cause you some confusion because it is joined, and therefore sometimes it may be difficult to recognize whether the sa belongs to the verb or not. So please pay attention to those two, sa and sawfa. Using kana with the imperfect tense al-mudari. Kana is very commonly used in the Quran. It is the most commonly used verb. It's actually a verb in its own right. It's called a special type of verb called fi'lun naqis, deficient verb. We'll look at a specific lesson on kana, inshallah ta'ala, in this first part of the course. But here I need to mention two very important points. Kana, when it's used with the madi, it gives the meaning of something that happened long time ago. So kana fataha, he had opened some time ago. Kanu fatahu, the reason I've given a second example to show kana will need to be conjugated exactly the same as we did with all the other verbs in the 14th form to match the conjugation, because it is a verb and the two coming together, we need to use kanu with fatahu. So again, please don't worry about this at this stage. We're going to learn kana in detail, but note the 14 different forms of kana, and when we use it with the past tense, we need to make sure that they match. So this is something we've already covered. So kana fataha, kanu fatahu. Again, in the dedicated lesson on kana, we'll go through this in detail. So kana, used with the madi, as we've already seen, gives us the meaning of something that has happened long time ago. Kana can also be used with the madi version of kana, can be also used with the mudari verb to give the meaning of something that is past but continuous and habitual. What do I mean by that? For example, kana yaftahu. I want to talk about somebody, say he was opening the mosque door every fajr when he was alive. So I'm talking about somebody in the past who used to open our masjid for fajr for people to enter. So kana yaftahu. He was opening something habitual that happened in the past. So it's continuous or habitual thing. For example, I would say every morning I would wake up and drink water. So again, that was something I'm describing long time ago when I was a child. That kind of meaning. So kana yaftahu, he was opening. Past continuous. Now look, the verb is mudare. The meaning is going to past continuous. We have the same thing in English. For example, I open the door. I open it now. I can say I used to open the door. So again, you can see that's gone in the past. Even the door, the verb form is the same. So again, we have these forms in different languages, but kana is very, very effective with the mudare, sending the message that it was past and it was habitual. So again, note, we'll have to match the form of kana. We will learn them, inshallah, in the appropriate lesson on kana, and then we will do this. But this is again a point because it is used with mudare quite frequently to give us the meaning of a habitual thing that was happening in the past on a regular basis. Summary of the prefixes and suffixes you will find with the mudare. Just as a quick recap, I shared this screen with you where I summarized for you the most commonly occurring prefixes that you're likely to find when you study the Quran. So we had wa, fa, qad. Again, go back and look at those. Inshallah, you do need to recall them quite instantly. So wa means and, fa means so, qad means certainly, faqad certainly, so certainly, laqad again double emphasis, which is not often translated, walaqad and certainly, and there's two emphasis there, doubling of the emphasis. Then we had ma, which negates, and we had kana. So again, we have one example for you on the screen. We have wa, which means and, so we can see the first word is wa, and then we have the verb itself. Ja'alna, we should be able to recognize ja'alna. Ja'alna is belonging to this this version here right at the end, which of course means na, we. So we made, and we made kum, and you should be able to recognize that the kum means you all, which is the attached pronoun, which acts as the object at the end of the verb. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ, and we made you all. And we made you all. So you see this type of structure quite commonly used in the Quran. Suffixes, the verb itself, prefix, the verb, and then the suffix afterwards. So the kum, attached pronoun. Just make a note that the attached pronouns, when added to a verb, will always be the object. And you can see the most common ones, inshallah ta'ala, repeatedly used in the Quran. And the verb, of course, can be madi, mudare, etc. And then before that, we can have a prefix, which could be fa, wa. Now we've learned a few more, which is exclusive to the mudare. So please recall this slide. Inshallah, I hope this slide will help you spending hours and hours looking through books. For the most common ones are summarized here for your benefit. With the mudare, we have some which are also used with the madi, but we have some new ones also. So again, note wa and fa, very commonly used in the Quran, and so. And then we have qad, which is certainly used with the mudare also, and faqad, laqad, la is also emphasis, similar to what we've seen with the madi also. Then we have la with a alif at the end. Please note this one. There is a difference between this one and this one. The la at the end is with an alif, lam with an alif, la is negation of the verb. We went through that in this session. Then we have the use of kana, and I said the kana, of course, it puts it into the past habitual tense, which you can see here, past habitual, something that is to happen a while ago. Then we have the new ones, which we've done sa and saufa. So we have sa and we have the saufa. Both of those are to do with the future tense. Please note they don't make any changes to the verb, just put the meaning into the future tense. Again, we see that already in the example in this session itself. And then we have two sets, which we said we're going to study later, lan plus a few others that convert or makes the changes at the end of the verb. And we have lam and a few others that makes the change at the end of the verb. And we divide them into three different groups for your easy study and reference. One example here for you, فَسَيَعْلَمُونَ. I'm sure you can see fa, then you can see the sa, and then if you split the verb here in terms of writing, you'll see that this part is actually your verb. Okay, this is your verb part. So the meaning of that will be then they will know. Then they will know. So you can see how the prefixes are used, and of course I've shown you an example with how the pronouns are attached. These are the only additions that you need to be focused upon, and then inshallah ta'ala you should be able to recognize verbs now. Again, like anything else in life, practice, practice, practice. The more you practice, the more verbs you look at, The more verbs, pages of Quran you open up and try to study, the more easier it will become. Without practice, you will forget everything that I've gone through in this session, though I do accept that quite a bit of this is a bit too much detail. But again, I'm hoping that through practice you will catch them, inshallah. Summary of the Mujarrad, the 6 babs. Finally, we have the 6 patterns of the Mujarrad. Again, just to remind you, Fataha, Yaftahu, Nasara, Yansuru, Daraba, Yadribu, Sami'a, Yasma'u. Hasiba, very rare. Karuma, very rare. And how they're mentioned, I'm going to use Fa for Fataha pattern, Noon for Nasara, Dad for Daraba, and Sin for Sami'a, and Ha for Hasiba and Karuma. They're very rare. So this is the naming I'm going to use. Of course, there are other conventions out there. I find this one the easiest, long as you've learned the verbs. So again, remember, all you got to know is these 4 patterns, the most common ones, and the prefixes and the suffixes. And inshallah ta'ala, you're on your way. Again, I've conjugated the whole 6 patterns for you. And this is all I believe that we need for the Mudari. So please take a look at them. Pay special attention to the first 4. Alhamdulillah, by Allah's grace, we've reached the end of lesson number 18, in which we've added some of our knowledge to what we learned in the previous lesson on the conjugation of the Mudari. So in this lesson, I've given you a summary of the most common prefixes and the most common suffixes, of course, which is only pronouns. And these are the real complexities regarding the Mudari. Please note, the Mudari has more detail than the Madi, and there are complex issues which we'll cover in the intermediate level. But for now, this lesson, inshallah, will give you a summary of which I believe is the most common knowledge that you need in order to identify them. Again, remind yourself, the Madi action complete, Mudari is action not yet done or will be done. Inshallah ta'ala, as you go through the study of the surahs of Quran, this will become relatively easy for you. Again, I've always emphasized this. I've tried to focus on the most commonly used structures in the Quran, because ultimately the aim and goal of this course is that you're now beginning to understand bits and pieces of the Quran, portions of it at least, inshallah. I'm hoping now, from now on, all the Madi and the Mudari, which are verbs nearly 9,000 times, from the Mujarrad form, you should be able to recognize from the Quran. And there are 9,000 lines in the Quran, so almost every line or every other line, you'll find 1 or 2 of them, inshallah. So please do concentrate. Maybe start with Surah Al-Baqarah and look through a couple of the pages as well. Jazakumullah khairan for all your feedback. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you and bless you. Inshallah ta'ala, I will see you in lesson number 19. For now, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
الذي علم بالقلم